They say a woman's worth is measured in the children she bears. Lavinia Hartley learned this truth in a London courtroom on a Tuesday morning in 1873, when her husband's barrister read the words that would strip her of everything: 5 years of marriage. No issue. The marriage is therefore dissolved on grounds of barrenness. She was 28 years old. She had loved her husband once. She had tried, God, how she had tried, to give him the heir his family demanded. But her body, it seemed, had other plans. What no one told her was this: sometimes the women who cannot bear children are destined to raise the ones who need them most. This is the story of a woman the world discarded. And the lonely duke who saw in her brokenness exactly what his shattered family needed to become whole again. The courtroom smelled of old wood and older judgments. Lavinia sat in the gallery with her spine pressed against the bench, hands folded in her lap like she was praying. She wasn't. She'd stopped praying 3 years ago, around the time the doctors started whispering in corners and her husband stopped looking at her during dinner. The petitioner seeks dissolution on grounds of the respondent's failure to produce an heir, the barrister droned, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. 5 years of marriage. No issue. The bloodline requires continuation. No issue. Such clean words for such devastating failure. Lavinia's eyes drifted to the second row where Robert sat, her husband, though not for much longer. His jaw was set, his gaze fixed firmly ahead. Beside him sat her. Alice Crawford. 22 years old, pink-cheeked, and visibly, undeniably pregnant beneath her cream silk gown. 7 months along, the whispers said. A boy, if the midwife could be believed. Alice's hand rested on her swollen belly with the casual confidence of a woman who had succeeded where Lavinia had failed. When their eyes met, Alice didn't look away. She smiled. Just slightly. Just enough. Lavinia's mother sat 3 rows behind her, black shawl pulled tight despite the June heat. When Lavinia glanced back, seeking something, comfort, solidarity, anything, her mother's gaze slid away like oil on water. Her father hadn't come at all. The petition is granted, the judge announced, his gavel falling like a headstone. The marriage is dissolved. Mrs. Hartley will vacate the marital home within the week. Just like that, it was over. Lavinia stood on legs that felt borrowed from someone else's body and walked out into the London sunlight. Behind her, she heard Alice's bright laugh, Robert's low murmur, the rustle of celebration disguised as sympathy. No one followed her. 3 days later, Lavinia sat in her father's study and learned what became of discarded wives. The Duke of Blackwood has made a proposal, her father said without preamble. He didn't look at her. He hadn't really looked at her since the divorce became public knowledge, since his business associates started asking pointed questions about the family's situation. Lavinia's hands tightened in her lap. What sort of proposal? Marriage. The word fell flat, transactional. In name only. You would serve as governess to his children. He requires household stability. You require. He gestured vaguely at her, at the scandal she'd become. A roof. I don't understand. Why me? Her father finally met her eyes. He didn't say. He asked for you specifically. Apparently, he's aware of your circumstances. Barrenness. He meant barrenness. The word everyone thought but no one said aloud in polite company. How many children? Lavinia asked, her voice steadier than she felt. 5. Ages 4 to 12. Their mother died 2 years past. He's had 7 governesses since. None lasted more than 6 weeks. If you're wondering why a duke would choose a disgraced, divorced woman to raise his children, you're not alone. Lavinia was wondering the same thing. But sometimes the most broken people can see what others miss. What are the terms? Her father slid a document across the desk. Separate chambers. No expectation of marital relations. You'd have a household allowance, standing in society as the Duchess, authority over the children and female staff. In exchange, you bring order to his home. And if I refuse? Silence. Lavinia looked down at her hands. She'd sold her jewelry to pay for lodging these past 3 days. Her trunks held 2 decent dresses and a coat with a torn lining. Her mother had made it clear she wouldn't be welcomed back into the family home, not with the scandal still fresh, not with Alice's baby coming soon as a living reminder of Lavinia's failure. She had no money. No prospects. No future. When does he expect an answer? He's waiting in the drawing room. Lavinia's head snapped up. Now. He said he'd wait as long as necessary. He's been there since 9 this morning. Her father checked his pocket watch. It's past 2. The Duke of Blackwood stood when Lavinia entered, and her first thought was that he looked tired. Not old, he couldn't have been more than 35, but tired in the way that goes deeper than sleep can fix. Dark hair streaked with premature silver. Sharp features that might have been handsome once, before grief carved them into something harder. Eyes the color of January skies. He was tall, broad-shouldered in a way that filled the room, but his posture suggested a man carrying weight no one else could see. "Miss Hartley," he said. His voice was low, carefully controlled. "Thank you for seeing me." "Your Grace." She curtsied, muscle memory from a life that felt like someone else's. "Please, sit." They sat in matching chairs on opposite sides of a cold fireplace. Lavinia folded her hands and waited. The Duke studied her for a long moment. Not the way men usually looked at women, not assessing her figure or her face, but as if he were trying to read something written beneath her skin. "I'll be direct," he said finally. "My children are suffering. I've failed them. Their mother's death left me, incapacitated in ways I didn't anticipate. The household has fallen apart. The governesses flee. The staff barely function. The children have become wild, angry creatures, and I don't know how to reach them anymore." His hands tightened on the armrests. "I need help. I need someone who won't abandon them when things become difficult. Someone who understands what it is to be judged, to be found wanting, to keep standing anyway." Lavinia's throat closed. "You want me because I'm desperate?" "No." The word came sharp, certain. "I want you because you're strong." She almost laughed. "I'm divorced. Barren. Ruined." "You're still breathing," he said quietly. "You're still here. That's stronger than most people I know. And here's the thing about broken people recognizing each other, they don't need perfect words. They just need truth." The Duke leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I can't offer you love. I can't offer you romance or passion or any of the things you might have wanted from a marriage. What I can offer is safety. Respect. Purpose. A place where you won't be judged for what you cannot give, only valued for what you can." Lavinia's vision blurred. She blinked hard. "The children will be difficult," he finished. "They've lost their mother. They've watched me fail them for 2 years. They don't trust easily. Neither do I." He paused. "But I've seen your references from before your marriage. I know you worked in your aunt's foundling home. I know you stayed up nights with sick children while other volunteers went home. I know you have no experience being cruel. That's all." Her voice cracked. "No cruelty. In my experience," the Duke said softly, "that's everything." Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but weighted with things unsaid. "If I agree," Lavinia began slowly, "what happens when I fail? When the children don't respond, when I break something irreplaceable, when I prove to be just another disappointment?" The Duke's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened. "Then we try again the next day. And the day after that. Until either it works or we both stop trying. But I won't send you away for failing, Lavinia. Only for cruelty." He stood, moved to the window, his back to her. "I leave for Derbyshire tomorrow morning at 8. The train from King's Cross. If you're there, we'll go to the cathedral first. Marry quietly. Then home to Hadley Park. And if I'm not, Then I'll keep looking. And you'll keep surviving, whatever that looks like. He turned back to her. But I hope you'll be there. He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the frame. The children need you, Miss Hartley. Whether they know it yet or not. After he left, Lavinia sat in the drawing room for another hour, watching the shadows lengthen across the floor. At 7 that evening, she packed her trunk. At 7:30 the next morning, she stood on the platform at King's Cross, a single carpet bag at her feet, and waited. When the Duke appeared through the steam and smoke, his face registered no surprise. Only quiet relief. "You came," he said. "I did." He offered his arm. Lavinia took it. And together, they boarded the train that would carry them toward a future neither of them could yet imagine. But already, though she didn't know it yet, the children waiting at Hadley Park were about to meet the mother they'd been grieving for without knowing they were allowed to find her again. The cathedral ceremony lasted 12 minutes. Lavinia wore her second-best dress, dark blue with black trim, appropriate for a woman still technically in social disgrace. The Duke wore his traveling clothes. There were no flowers, no music, no guests. Just a bored curate, 2 witnesses pulled from the street, and vows spoken in voices that didn't waver because they didn't pretend to mean more than they did. When the curate said, "You may kiss the bride," the Duke simply nodded at her and turned toward the door. Lavinia followed him back to the train station. Duchess of Blackwood now. The title felt like a coat several sizes too large. The journey to Derbyshire took 5 hours. The Duke read parliamentary reports. Lavinia watched the countryside roll past, London's smoke giving way to green fields, then hills, then the wild, windswept moors of the Peak District. As the sun began its descent, he spoke for the first time since leaving the cathedral. Hadley Park is, not what it was. Lavinia turned from the window. What was it? My wife loved it. Elizabeth. She had plans, restoration, gardens, modernization. After she died, I let it all go. His jaw tightened. I let everything go. The carriage met them at the station in Bakewell. As they rounded the final bend, Lavinia got her first glimpse of Hadley Park. It should have been magnificent. The bones were there, a sprawling manor house in grey stone, Gothic windows, a tower at the eastern corner. But the gardens were overgrown, ivy crawling up the walls like it was trying to pull the house into the earth. Several windows on the upper floors were shuttered. The fountain in the circular drive sat empty, filled with dead leaves. "Welcome home," the Duke said quietly. There was no joy in it. The front door opened before they reached it. A butler emerged, elderly, stern-faced, moving with the careful dignity of a man holding a sinking ship together through sheer force of will. "Your Grace. The children are in the nursery. They've been informed of your arrival." "Thank you, Davies." The Duke glanced at Lavinia. "This is the new Duchess. She'll require the mistress's chambers prepared." Davies's expression didn't change, but Lavinia caught the flicker in his eyes. Judgment. Of course. The staff would know everything, the divorce, the scandal, the arrangement. "Of course, Your Grace. Though I should mention, the Dowager Duchess arrived this afternoon. Unannounced. She's taken the liberty of inviting several guests for dinner. They'll arrive within the hour." The Duke went still. "She what?" "I attempted to redirect her, sir, but—" "I understand." The Duke's voice went flat. He turned to Lavinia. "I'm sorry. My mother has a talent for timing." Lavinia barely had time to see her chambers, large, cold, smelling faintly of lavender and dust, before a maid appeared with a dress. "Her Grace, the Dowager, sent this. Says you'll need something proper for dinner." The gown was beautiful. Emerald silk with black lace, appropriate for mourning but expensive enough to make a statement. It also wasn't Lavinia's size. Too tight in the shoulders, too loose in the waist. If you've ever had to meet your new family while wearing someone else's life like an ill-fitting costume, you know the feeling in Lavinia's chest right now. But sometimes we have to play the part before we become it. She dressed anyway. The dining room gleamed with silver and crystal. 12 guests sat around the long mahogany table, local gentry, a magistrate, a baronet and his wife. At the head sat the Dowager Duchess, silver-haired, ramrod straight, with eyes that missed nothing. Lavinia was seated halfway down, between a vicar who smelled of tobacco and a woman who introduced herself as Lady Ashford and immediately turned away to gossip with her neighbor. The Duke sat at the opposite end, his face carefully blank. Dinner began. Lavinia tried. She made polite conversation with the vicar about his parish. She used the correct fork for each course. She laughed quietly when others laughed, though she missed most of the jokes. But her hands shook every time she reached for her glass. The Dowager watched her like a hawk studying a mouse. "Tell me, my dear," the Dowager said during the third course, her voice cutting through the table chatter. "How are you finding Hadley Park? Quite different from your previous circumstances, I imagine." The table went quiet. Lavinia's throat closed. "It's beautiful, Your Grace." And the children? I understand you've not met them yet." "I'll meet them tomorrow, Your Grace." "Tomorrow." The Dowager smiled without warmth. "How modern. In my day, a new mother would have greeted her children before greeting dinner guests. But then, you're not precisely a mother, are you?" Lavinia's hands clenched in her lap. "No, Your Grace." "Well." The Dowager lifted her wine glass. "I suppose we must all make do with what Providence provides." Lavinia reached for her own glass, too quickly, too desperately. Her hand caught the base. The crystal wobbled. Time slowed. She grabbed for it. Missed. The decanter toppled sideways, red wine flooding across the white tablecloth like blood from a wound. Crystal shattered. Shards glittered in the candlelight. Lavinia froze. The room went utterly silent. She stared at the spreading stain, at the broken glass, at the ruin she'd made of her first dinner as Duchess of Blackwood. Her first official act, destruction. The Dowager's face hardened. "That decanter," she said coldly, "was a wedding gift to my great-grandmother. 200 years old. Venetian crystal. Irreplaceable." "I'm so sorry," Lavinia whispered. Her vision blurred. "I'll pay for it, I'll pay for it." The Dowager laughed. "My dear girl, you can't afford to breathe the air in this house, much less replace heirlooms." Lady Ashford leaned toward her companion and whispered, loudly enough to carry, what did he expect, really? Bringing that sort of woman into his home? Lavinia couldn't breathe. The room pressed in on all sides. This was Robert's house all over again, the dropped teacup, the ruined dress, the public humiliation followed by private rage. She started to stand, to flee, to disappear before the Duke could say what she knew he must be thinking. "It's only glass." The Duke's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Everyone turned. He stood slowly, deliberately, and walked the length of the table. He bent, picked up the largest shard of crystal, and held it up to the light. "My great-grandfather," he said conversationally, "was a cruel man. He beat my great-grandmother regularly. Used this very decanter to serve the wine he drank before doing so." He dropped the shard back onto the table with a soft clink. "I'm glad it's broken." The Dowager's face flushed. "Edmund. Dinner is finished." The Duke turned to Davies. "Please show the guests to their carriages." "But the dessert course is cancelled." He looked at each guest in turn. No one met his eyes. "Thank you for coming. Good night." Sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do isn't grand or loud. Sometimes it's just refusing to let someone be punished for being human. The room cleared in a rustle of silk and muttered excuses. The Dowager left last, her spine rigid with fury. When they were alone, Lavinia still frozen in her chair, the Duke standing amid the wreckage, he spoke quietly. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "Good. He reached down, offered his hand. Come on. She took it. Let him pull her to her feet. I ruined everything, she whispered. You spilled wine. He looked at the stain, the broken glass. Wine spills. Glass breaks. That's what they do. It doesn't make you a ruin. Lavinia's chest ached. You don't understand. I'm always breaking things. I'm clumsy and nervous and I don't belong in places like this. Good. She blinked. What? I said good. The Duke's expression softened just slightly. This house has been full of people who belong here for 2 years. They've been perfectly polished, perfectly behaved, and perfectly useless. Maybe what we need is someone who breaks things. Maybe breaking is how we start to rebuild. He released her hand, stepped back. Get some rest. Tomorrow you'll meet the children. They'll probably hate you at first. They hate everyone. That's reassuring. I'm not here to reassure you. But his eyes held something gentler than his words. I'm here to tell you the truth. And the truth is, tonight wasn't a disaster. It was just dinner. He walked toward the door, paused. Lavinia? Yes. That dress doesn't fit you. Tomorrow, wear something of your own. I married you, not my mother's idea of who you should be. Lavinia should have gone to bed. Instead, she found herself walking the darkened corridors of Hadley Park, still in the ill-fitting gown, unable to quiet her racing thoughts. She passed closed doors, portraits of stern-faced ancestors, windows overlooking gardens gone wild. The house felt like a mausoleum, beautiful and cold and full of ghosts. Light spilled from beneath a door at the end of the east wing. Voices drifted out. Children's voices. Lavinia stopped, hand raised to knock. Then lowered it. Tomorrow. Tomorrow she'd meet them. Tonight she was too raw, too shaken. She turned away, and nearly collided with the Duke. Can't sleep either, he asked. I thought I'd explore. Find anything interesting? Ghosts, mostly. He smiled, barely, but it was there. Hadley Park's full of them. He gestured toward the staircase. Come on. If we're both awake, we might as well be awake together. She followed him to his study, a room that clearly hadn't seen a woman in years. Books piled on every surface, papers scattered, a cold fireplace, 2 worn leather chairs. The Duke poured 2 glasses of brandy without asking, handed her one. They sat in silence. Lavinia sipped the brandy. It burned, but it was a good burn, something solid and real. Your mother hates me, she said finally. My mother hates everyone. Don't take it personally. She said I'm not a real mother. You're not. He met her eyes. You're something else. Maybe something better. The children's real mother loved them desperately, but she's gone. They don't need another version of her. They need whoever you are. Lavinia studied him in the lamplight. Why did you really choose me? I told you. No. She leaned forward. The real reason. Long silence. Because, he said slowly, when I read about your divorce in the papers, I saw the way your husband spoke about you. Not with anger. With indifference. Like you'd simply failed to be what he needed and therefore ceased to matter. He looked down at his glass. I know what it is to be looked at like that. After Elizabeth died, that's how everyone looked at me. Like I'd failed at the one thing that mattered. Your children. My children. My estate. My duty. Everything. He drank deeply. I thought, if I found someone who understood that feeling, maybe they'd understand the children too. Maybe they wouldn't run when things got hard. Maybe they'd stay because they knew there was nowhere else to go. Lavinia's breath caught. That's cruel. Is it? Or is it honest? Both. He smiled again, sad this time. Yeah. Both. They sat until the clock struck midnight. Then Lavinia stood. Thank you for the brandy. And for, tonight. Don't thank me for telling the truth about a bastard and a broken cup. At the door, she paused. Your Grace. Edmund. We're married. You might as well use my name. Edmund. It felt strange in her mouth. That decanter really was 200 years old. I know. And you're really glad it's broken? He looked up at her, and for the first time, she saw something other than grief in his eyes. Everything in this house is a relic of the past. Maybe breaking a few things is exactly what we need. Lavinia nodded and left him there, surrounded by his papers and his ghosts. But as she climbed the stairs to her cold chambers, she thought about what he'd said. Maybe breaking is how we start to rebuild. Maybe. Lavinia woke to silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy silence of a house holding its breath. She dressed in her own clothes this time, a simple gray day dress, practical and plain, and made her way downstairs. Davies intercepted her in the hall. The children take breakfast in the nursery, Your Grace. Shall I have them brought down? No. Lavinia's hands trembled, but she kept her voice steady. I'll go to them. His eyebrows rose a fraction. As you wish. The nursery occupied the entire third floor of the west wing. Lavinia climbed the stairs slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. Voices drifted down, arguing, laughing, the crash of something breaking followed by silence. She knocked. The door flew open. A boy stood there, 12, maybe, dark hair like his father's, eyes too old for his face. Who are you? He demanded. I'm Lavinia. Your father's. The new wife. He looked her up and down with brutal efficiency. You won't last. None of them do. Henry. The Duke's voice came from behind her. She hadn't heard him approach. Manners. Henry's jaw set. Why should I? She's already planning how to leave. They all do. He turned and walked back into the nursery. Lavinia followed. 5 pairs of eyes turned toward her. Henry stood with his arms crossed, hostile. Beside him, a girl of about 10 clutched a worn shawl. Clara, Lavinia guessed. She didn't speak, just stared with eyes that had seen too much. The twins, 7 years old, a boy and girl, whispered to each other behind an overturned chair. William and Amelia. They watched Lavinia like she was a puzzle they hadn't decided if they wanted to solve. And on the floor, building a tower of blocks, sat the youngest. Sophie. 4 years old with blonde curls and her mother's face. The Duke stepped into the room. This is Lavinia. She'll be living here now. You'll treat her with respect. Why? Henry shot back. We treated the others with respect and they left anyway. Because I'm asking you to. You ask us for a lot of things, Father. Doesn't mean we can do them. The words hung in the air like smoke. The Duke's face went carefully blank. Lavinia recognized that look, the same expression he'd worn at dinner last night, the same mask he showed the world when something hurt too deeply to acknowledge. Henry, Lavinia said quietly. You're right. Everyone turned to stare at her. I might not last, she continued. I don't know your routines. I don't know what you like for breakfast or which books you've read or why Clara won't let go of that shawl. I'll probably do everything wrong at first. Henry's eyes narrowed. Then why are you here? Because your father asked me to try. And because, she paused, choosing her words carefully. Because I know what it is to be left. I know how it feels when people look at you and only see what you can't give them. I know what it's like to be told you're not enough. Clara's grip on the shawl tightened. So I'm here, Lavinia finished. And I'll keep being here until someone tells me to leave. Or until you decide you want me to stay. Whichever comes first. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you're scared. Lavinia was terrified. But she was also done pretending to be perfect. Silence. Then Sophie stood, walked over, and held up a wooden block. "This is a castle," she announced. Lavinia knelt down. "It's beautiful. It keeps falling. Then we'll build it stronger." Lavinia picked up another block. "May I help?" Sophie studied her for a long moment. Then nodded. They built in silence while the others watched. When the tower finally stood, 10 blocks high, wobbling but stable, Sophie clapped her hands. "It didn't fall." "No," Lavinia said softly. "It didn't." Behind them, the Duke slipped out of the room. Lavinia didn't notice. She was too busy listening to William explain, in great detail, why their previous governess had been afraid of horses. The next week passed in a blur of small failures and smaller victories. Lavinia couldn't manage the household staff, the cook ignored her menu requests, the maids rearranged her orders. She tried to teach Clara embroidery and pricked her finger 3 times. The lessons she planned for the twins descended into chaos when they decided to stage a dramatic reenactment of Macbeth using kitchen utensils. But she showed up every morning. She sat with Sophie and built towers. She listened when Henry ranted about his Latin tutor. She let Clara curl up beside her in the library, saying nothing, just being present. She didn't try to be their mother. She just tried to be there. Then, on the 8th night, Sophie woke screaming. Lavinia heard it from her chambers, high, piercing, terrified. She ran barefoot down the corridor, nightgown flying, no thought for propriety or protocol. The nursery was chaos. Sophie thrashed in her bed, skin burning hot, eyes rolled back. The twins huddled in the corner. Clara stood frozen. Henry tried to hold his little sister down, his face white with panic. "She's burning up," he gasped. "I don't know what to." Lavinia pushed past him, pressed her hand to Sophie's forehead. "Fever. Dangerously high. Get your father," she ordered. "Now." Henry fled. Lavinia turned to Clara. "I need cool water, clean cloths, and willow bark if there's any in the house. Can you get those things?" Clara nodded and ran. "William, Amelia, go to your room. Lock the door. Don't come out until someone comes for you." "But Sophie." "We'll be fine. Go." They went. Lavinia stripped Sophie's nightgown, began sponging her burning skin with water from the wash basin. The little girl convulsed, whimpered, cried out for someone who wasn't there. "Mama," she sobbed. "Mama, it hurts." Lavinia's chest cracked open. She gathered the child into her arms, held her close, began to rock. "I'm here, darling. I'm here." The Duke appeared in the doorway, hair wild, shirt unbuttoned. He took one look at Sophie and went pale. "Not again," he whispered. "Please God, not again." Lavinia recognized the terror in his eyes. His wife had died of fever. He was watching it happen again to his baby girl. "Edmund." Her voice cut through his panic. "I need laudanum. Just a few drops. And more water." He didn't move. "Edmund." His eyes focused on her. "She's dying." "She's not. But I need your help. Please." He left. Returned moments later with a brown bottle and a pitcher. His hands shook so badly Lavinia had to take them from him. "Sit," she commanded. "Stay with Henry and Clara. I'll call if I need you." "I should. You should trust me." Lavinia met his gaze. "Can you do that?" After a heartbeat, he nodded and left. Lavinia worked through the night. She sponged Sophie's burning skin. Dribbled water between cracked lips. Measured tiny doses of laudanum when the convulsions grew too violent. She sang, old lullabies her mother had sung to her before everything fell apart, songs she'd thought she'd forgotten. "Lavender's blue, dilly dilly, lavender's green. When I am king, dilly dilly, you shall be queen." Sophie whimpered, cried, called for her mother a dozen times. Each time, Lavinia answered. I'm here. I'm not leaving. I promise. Around 3 in the morning, Clara crept back in and sat in the corner, clutching her shawl. Lavinia didn't send her away. Just kept singing, kept sponging, kept praying to a God she wasn't sure listened anymore. At dawn, Henry appeared with tea. He set it down without a word and left. By mid-morning, the fever finally, broke. Sophie opened her eyes. They were clear, focused. She looked up at Lavinia and whispered, "Thirsty?" Lavinia nearly sobbed with relief. "Of course, sweetheart." She held the cup while Sophie drank. The little girl finished, sank back into the pillows, and reached for Lavinia's hand. "Stay. As long as you need me." "Forever." Lavinia's throat closed. "Yes. Forever." Sophie smiled and drifted into real sleep, not the fever-tossed delirium but actual rest. Lavinia stayed in the chair, holding the small hand, until her own body screamed with exhaustion. She must have dozed. Because when she opened her eyes, the Duke stood in the doorway. He looked at his daughter, peaceful, breathing easily, and something broke in his face. "You saved her," he said hoarsely. "Anyone would have." "No." He crossed the room, knelt beside the chair. "The others ran when the children got sick. Every single one. Said it wasn't their duty, wasn't what they'd agreed to. But you stayed." Lavinia looked down at Sophie's sleeping face. "She needed me. We all need you." The words came out raw, unguarded. "I need you." Their eyes met. Here's what nobody tells you about falling in love: sometimes it doesn't happen all at once. Sometimes it's built from nights spent fighting death together, from choosing to stay when leaving would be easier, from seeing someone be brave in ways that don't look like bravery at all. Before Lavinia could respond, Sophie stirred. "Mama?" Lavinia's breath caught. "I'm here, darling. Hungry. Want pancakes." Despite everything, Lavinia laughed. "I'll see what I can do." The Duke stood, backed toward the door. But he didn't leave immediately. Just watched as Lavinia smoothed Sophie's hair, tucked the blanket around her small shoulders, hummed softly. "Lavinia," he said quietly. She looked up. "Thank you. For what I could not do." Then he was gone. Later that day, when Sophie was sitting up and eating, not pancakes, but toast with jam, the other children crept in one by one. Henry brought his Latin book and read aloud, badly, mispronouncing half the words, but trying. Clara draped her precious shawl over Sophie's legs. The twins presented a drawing they'd made, the 6 of them holding hands in front of Hadley Park. "That's you," Amelia said, pointing to a stick figure with yellow hair. "You're in the family now." "Because you stayed," William added. "When you didn't have to." Lavinia studied the drawing, her vision blurring. That night at dinner, William passed her the butter and said, "Here, Mama." The word fell into the silence like a stone into still water. Henry looked up sharply. Clara went still. The Duke's fork paused halfway to his mouth. William froze. "I mean, I didn't, sorry, I." "It's all right," Lavinia said softly. "You can call me that. If you want to." "Really?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. William grinned. Amelia giggled. And just like that, it was settled. She was Mama now. Later, when the children were in bed and Lavinia sat in the drawing room with tea she was too tired to drink, the Duke found her. He didn't speak. Just sat in the chair across from her, a glass of brandy in his hand. "They called me Mama," Lavinia said to the fire. "I heard. I'm not their mother." "No." He took a sip. "You're something else. Something they chose." Lavinia turned to look at him. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite name, something between wonder and grief, gratitude and fear. "Edmund?" Thank you. For bringing me here." He smiled, small and sad. I'm starting to think I'm the one who should be grateful. They sat in comfortable silence until the fire burned low. And in the nursery above them, 5 children slept soundly, including one little girl who had called a woman Mama for the first time since her mother died, and meant it. 6 months passed like water smoothing stones. Lavinia learned the children's rhythms. Henry studied best in the early morning. Clara needed silence to read. The twins required constant motion or they'd create chaos. Sophie followed Lavinia everywhere, a small shadow that whispered secrets and asked endless questions about why birds sang and where clouds went at night. The household slowly, grudgingly bent to Lavinia's presence. The cook began asking her opinion on menus. The maid stopped rearranging her orders. Davies addressed her as, Your Grace, without the subtle emphasis that suggested the title didn't quite fit. The Duke watched it all from a careful distance. He joined them for breakfast now. Sat in the drawing room while Lavinia read to the children. Once, she'd looked up from a book to find him staring at her with an expression that made her heart stutter, something between hunger and terror, like a man watching something beautiful through glass he was afraid to break. But he never touched her. Never crossed the invisible line they'd drawn on their wedding day. Until Parliament demanded his presence in London. It's 6 weeks, he said over breakfast, not meeting her eyes. Lords are in session. I can't avoid it. Henry looked up from his eggs. We always go with you. Not this year. Why not? Clara asked quietly. The Duke's jaw tightened. London is complicated. With everything that's happened. You mean with me, Lavinia said. People will talk. People always talk. But this time they'll have something real to say. She set down her teacup. I'm divorced. Barren. I married you within days of my annulment. The scandal hasn't faded, Edmund. It's just been waiting. Silence around the table. Then Sophie climbed down from her chair, walked to Lavinia, and wrapped both arms around her waist. I don't care what London says. You're my mama. Lavinia's throat ached. She ran her fingers through Sophie's curls. The Duke watched this exchange, something shifting in his face. Then we'll all go. Together. Edmund. Together, he repeated. Let them talk. Let them judge. You're the Duchess of Blackwood. It's time London remembered what that means. Blackwood House in Mayfair was everything Hadley Park wasn't, polished, pristine, staffed with servants who'd never seen children run through halls or heard laughter echo off marble floors. The children hated it immediately. It's like a museum, Henry muttered, eyeing the crystal chandelier as if it might fall and kill them all. Museums are more fun, William said. They have dinosaurs. Lavinia had to agree. The townhouse felt like a mausoleum, beautiful and cold and full of things that mustn't be touched. But London itself thrilled the children. They visited the Tower, the British Museum, Hyde Park. Lavinia took them for ices at Gunter's, where they scandalized other patrons by laughing too loudly and dripping raspberry syrup on their fancy clothes. The Duke joined them when parliamentary sessions allowed. He looked different in London, more formal, more distant, like he was wearing armor she couldn't see. Are you all right? She asked one evening as they walked through Hyde Park, the children running ahead. I'm always all right. That's not an answer. He stopped walking. London reminds me of everything I failed at. My first marriage. My duties. Being the man everyone expected me to be. He looked at her. I'm afraid I'll fail you too. Fail them. Lavinia touched his arm. You haven't failed anyone. Yet. Before she could respond, Sophie came running back, breathless. Mama. There's swans. Real swans. Come see. Lavinia let herself be pulled away, but she felt the Duke's eyes on her back. The opera was a mistake. Lavinia knew it the moment the invitation arrived, cream paper, elegant script, the Dowager Duchess's handwriting. My dear, surely you'll attend the season's opening at Covent Garden. It would be unseemly for the Duke to appear without his wife. Translation: London is watching. Don't embarrass us. You don't have to go, Edmund said when she showed him the invitation. Yes, I do. Lavinia folded the paper carefully. Running away just confirms what they think, that I'm not fit to be here. You're more fit than any of them. Then I'll prove it. Sometimes courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about walking straight into the thing that terrifies you and refusing to let it define you. Lavinia was about to face every nightmare from her past, and she was going to do it in a ball gown. The night of the opera, Lavinia dressed in deep blue silk, the blackwood sapphires at her throat, her hair swept up, gloves to her elbows. She looked every inch a duchess. She felt like an imposter. The Duke waited at the bottom of the stairs. When he saw her, something flashed in his eyes, surprise, admiration, something deeper he quickly buried. You're beautiful, he said quietly. I'm terrified. You're both. He offered his arm. Ready? No. Good. Neither am I. Covent Garden blazed with light and jewels and whispered gossip. Lavinia felt eyes tracking her from the moment they entered, the scandalous new duchess, the Barren woman who'd somehow landed a duke. Their box was prominent, impossible to miss. The perfect stage for London's judgment. The first act passed in a blur of music Lavinia couldn't hear over her pounding heart. During intermission, she excused herself to the ladies' retiring room, desperate for a moment alone. She should have stayed in the box. Because when she emerged, she walked directly into her past. Robert stood in the corridor, older than she remembered, softer around the middle. Beside him, glowing with health and triumph, stood Alice. Very, very pregnant. Lavinia froze. Lavinia, Robert said, his tone carefully neutral. What a surprise. Robert. Alice. She started to move past them. Alice's voice rang out, sweet as poisoned honey. My goodness. The Barren first wife. How quaint that you found employment. Several nearby conversations stopped. Lavinia's hands clenched in her gloves. I should return to my box. Oh, don't rush off. Alice touched her enormous belly with deliberate emphasis. I've been meaning to thank you, actually. If you'd been able to do your duty, I'd never have met my darling Robert. So really, your failure was my fortune. Robert shifted uncomfortably. Alice, perhaps. What? I'm simply stating facts. Alice's eyes glittered with malice. She couldn't give you children. I can. I'm 7 months along with a son, the heir you always wanted. Finally, the family bloodline is secure. Lavinia's vision blurred. She was back in that courtroom, hearing the words read aloud, no issue. Barren. Failed. Some women, Alice continued, louder now, are made for bearing children. For being wives and mothers. Others. She looked Lavinia up and down. Well. At least you found work suited to your limitations. Governessing must keep you busy. The corridor had gone silent. Everyone watching. Lavinia opened her mouth, to say what, she didn't know. To defend herself. To run. Then a hand settled warm against her back. Lady Blackwood, the Duke's voice came from behind her, perfectly calm, was mother to 5 children who call her by that title because she's earned it. Lavinia turned. Edmund stood there, not in fighting stance but utterly still, his presence filling the corridor like a thunderstorm about to break. He didn't look at Robert or Alice. Only at Lavinia. Childbirth, he said quietly, makes a mother of the body. Lavinia is a mother of the heart. She stayed up 3 nights with my daughter when fever nearly took her. She taught my son to read when 6 tutors had given up. She holds my children when they cry for the mother they lost, and she doesn't tell them to forget, she teaches them to remember with love instead of pain. He stepped forward, still not looking at Alice's belly or Robert's face. She does this knowing she'll never carry a child herself. Knowing society judges her for it. Knowing people like you will use her pain as entertainment. His voice dropped, went cold as winter. So yes, she's a mother. She's the mother. The one who chose them when she didn't have to. The one who stays when it's hard. The one who loves them because she wants to, not because biology demands it. Alice's face flushed crimson. Now if you'll excuse us, Edmund said, finally meeting Robert's eyes with something that might have been pity, the second act is beginning. And unlike some people, we don't abandon the things we commit to halfway through. He offered Lavinia his arm. She took it with shaking hands. They walked away together, leaving Alice sputtering and Robert looking distinctly uncomfortable. The corridor remained silent until they turned the corner. Then Lavinia stopped, pressed her hand to her mouth, and started to laugh, or cry, she couldn't tell which. I'm sorry, Edmund said immediately. I overstepped. I shouldn't have. Don't apologize. Lavinia looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. No one has ever, her voice broke. No one has ever defended me like that. His expression softened. Then you've been surrounded by fools. I cried, she whispered. But not because I was scared. Because someone finally said I was enough. That what I do matters. That I'm everything, he finished. You're everything, Lavinia. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning neither was quite ready to name. And sometimes love isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's a man standing in a corridor telling the world that you matter. That you're worthy. That you're enough exactly as you are. They didn't return to the opera. Instead, they went back to Blackwood House, where the children waited with their nurse. Sophie ran to Lavinia the moment she entered. Did you see the singers? Were they beautiful? Lavinia knelt, gathered the little girl close. The most beautiful thing I saw tonight was coming home to you. Later, when she was tucking Sophie into bed, the child grabbed her hand. Mama? Yes, darling. That lady Papa told us about, your old husband's new wife, is she having a baby? Lavinia's chest tightened. Yes. Are you sad? Honest answer or comforting lie? Lavinia chose honesty. A little. Not because I want to be her. But because I wanted to be a mother for so long, and my body couldn't do it. Sophie thought about this seriously. Then, but you are a mother. You're my mother. And Henry's and Clara's and William's and Amelia's. That's 5 whole children. That lady only has one and it's not even born yet. Lavinia laughed through tears. You're right. I'm very lucky. We're lucky, Sophie corrected. Because you stayed when you could have left. That makes you the best mama ever. Lavinia kissed her forehead. Go to sleep, sweetheart. Will you be here tomorrow? Every tomorrow. Promise? Promise. Sophie smiled and drifted off. Lavinia stood in the doorway, watching the child sleep, and realized something that made her breath catch. She wasn't mourning what she'd lost anymore. She was celebrating what she'd found. When she turned, Edmund stood in the corridor. How long he'd been there, she didn't know. She's asleep, Lavinia said softly. I heard. He stepped closer. What you said to her, about wanting to be a mother, was true. I know. He reached out, hesitated, then gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. But you are one. Not despite your circumstances. Because of what you chose to do with them. Lavinia's heart hammered. Edmund. I know this wasn't what we agreed to, he said quietly. I know I promised you safety, respect, distance. But somewhere in the last 6 months, that changed. At least for me. She couldn't breathe. How? I stopped seeing you as the solution to a problem. I started seeing you as, he paused. As the woman I fall asleep thinking about. The one I look for in every room. The one who made my house feel like a home again. Lavinia's hand found his. I thought I was the only one feeling this. God, no. His thumb traced circles on her palm. I've been trying not to feel it. Trying to honor our arrangement. Trying not to want what I have no right to ask for. What do you want to ask for? He met her eyes. A real marriage. Not an arrangement. Not a transaction. Something true. They returned to Hadley Park 3 days later, the children chattering about London's wonders, Lavinia's hand occasionally finding Edmund's in the carriage when the children weren't looking. Everything had shifted. The air between them felt electric, full of promise. Lavinia should have known peace never lasted. The letter arrived on their second morning back. Edmund read it at breakfast, his face going pale, then hard. He folded it carefully and set it beside his plate. What is it? Lavinia asked. Nothing that concerns you. Edmund. He met her eyes. Estate business. I'll handle it. But she saw the tension in his jaw, the way his hand gripped his coffee cup too tightly. That afternoon, voices exploded from his study, shouting, accusations, threats. Lavinia was in the garden with Sophie when she heard it. She left the child with the gardener and moved toward the house. Through the study window, she saw Edmund standing rigid behind his desk. Across from him loomed a man she didn't recognize, thick-necked, expensive coat, the kind of face that smiled while calculating how to ruin you. 2 years overdue, Your Grace, the man said, loud enough for Lavinia to hear from the hallway where she'd stopped. The estate yields nothing but debt. Your late wife's medical expenses alone are none of your concern, Edmund cut in coldly. They became my concern when you borrowed £50,000 to pay them. The man leaned forward. I've been patient. Lenient, even. But my patience has limits. I've made payments. Insufficient payments. Meanwhile, you're hosting children at Gunter's and buying sapphires for your new wife. Venom dripped from the last 2 words. Perhaps your priorities need adjusting. Lavinia's stomach dropped. £50,000. A fortune. No wonder Hadley Park was crumbling. You'll have your money, Edmund said. When? I want payment or collateral. The London house, perhaps. Or, the man smiled, there are other arrangements we might make. A man in your position, with a young wife. The implication hung in the air like poison. Edmund moved so fast Lavinia almost missed it. He was around the desk, the man's collar in his fist, before she could blink. Get out. Careful, Your Grace. Assault won't help your financial situation. Out. Now. Don't return. The man straightened his coat, still smiling. 3 months. Then I take the estate. Good day, Your Grace. He left through the front door. Edmund stood in his study, breathing hard, hands shaking with suppressed rage. Lavinia waited until the man's carriage pulled away, then entered the study. Don't, Edmund said without turning. Don't ask. Don't try to help. This isn't your burden. We're married. Your burdens are mine. Are they? He turned, and she saw something broken in his eyes. This arrangement, this marriage, I brought you here promising safety. Security. Instead, I'm drowning, and I'm going to pull you down with me. Lavinia crossed to him. Tell me everything. The truth spilled out like a wound finally lanced. Elizabeth's illness had lasted 18 months. Every specialist in England, experimental treatments from the continent, around-the-clock nursing care. Edmund had spent everything trying to save her. Then borrowed more. Then more. She died anyway, he said hollowly. And I was left with 5 grieving children in debt I can't repay. The estate barely produces enough to feed us, much less generate income. I've sold everything I can. There's nothing left. The London house. Worth less than I owe. Grimshaw knows it. He's waiting for me to default so he can take Hadley Park for pennies on the pound. Lavinia's mind raced. There has to be something. Some asset, some option. There isn't. Edmund sank into his chair. In 3 months, we lose everything. The children lose their home. He looked at her. You deserve better than this. Better than me. Stop. Lavinia. I said stop. She knelt before him, took his hands. I didn't marry you for your money. I married you because you saw me when everyone else looked away. Because you gave me a home when I had nowhere to go. Because you trusted me with the things you loved most in this world. His thumb traced her knuckles. I'm going to fail you. Then we'll fail together. She squeezed his hands. But we're not failing yet. There's still time. Time for what? I don't know yet. She stood. But I'm not giving up. And neither are you. The next morning, Lavinia walked the estate. Really walked it, not the manicured gardens near the house, but the acres beyond. Fields lying fallow. Orchards long untended. A massive greenhouse, glass cracked, filled with dead plants and broken pots. So much waste. So much potential. She was sketching rough notes when she heard footsteps behind her. Lost? Lavinia turned. The man from yesterday, Grimshaw, stood 10 feet away, that same calculating smile on his face. Just exploring, she said carefully. Ah. Cataloging your new possessions before you lose them. He moved closer. Pity, really. A woman of your particular circumstances, landing in such a precarious situation. I should return to the house. Should you? He stepped into her path. Or should we have a conversation? Woman to man. Practical people finding practical solutions. Lavinia's pulse quickened. I don't know what you mean. Don't you? His eyes traveled over her in a way that made her skin crawl. Your husband can't pay his debts. But perhaps you could. There are ways a beautiful woman can be persuasive. Ways to buy time, at least. Horror flooded through her. You're suggesting. I'm suggesting we could come to an arrangement. Private. Mutually beneficial. He reached out, his fingers brushing her wrist. After all, what's one more scandal in a life full of them? Lavinia jerked back, but he grabbed her wrist, yanked her forward. Don't be coy, he hissed. You think you're the first desperate woman I've. The impact came from nowhere. Edmund hit Grimshaw with the full force of his body, sending them both crashing to the ground. He landed on top, drew back his fist, and punched the creditor square in the jaw. You touch her again, Edmund snarled, and I'll kill you. Debts be damned. Laws be damned. I will end you. Grimshaw spat blood. You just assaulted. Edmund hit him again. Say another word. Please. Give me an excuse. Sometimes love isn't gentle or poetic. Sometimes it's feral and protective and absolutely certain that some lines cannot be crossed without consequences. Edmund was done being civilized. Davies appeared, breathless. Your Grace, I heard. Get him off my land, Edmund ordered without looking away from Grimshaw. If he returns, have the constable arrest him for trespassing. But the debt will be paid. One way or another. Edmund stood, pulling Grimshaw up by his collar. But not by her. Never by her. He shoved the man toward Davies. Get him out of my sight. When they were alone, Edmund turned to Lavinia. His knuckles were split and bleeding, his shirt torn, his chest heaving. Did he hurt you? No. You stopped him. If I'd been 5 seconds later. But you weren't. Lavinia stepped close, took his bleeding hand in hers. You came. I'll always come. His voice broke. Lavinia, if anything had happened to you. Nothing did. She pressed her lips to his scraped knuckles. I'm all right. But Edmund pulled her against his chest, held her so tightly she could feel his heart hammering. I can't lose you. Not you. Not after everything. Lavinia wrapped her arms around him and held on just as fiercely. They stood like that for a long time, two broken people clinging to each other in a dying garden, refusing to let go. That evening, Lavinia tended his wounds in his study. She cleaned the cuts with whiskey, wrapped his knuckles in clean linen, worked in focused silence while he watched her. "You didn't have to do that," she said finally. "Fight him. You could have been arrested." "Yes, I did. Edmund. No one touches you." His voice was absolutely certain. "Not without your permission. Not while I breathe. I don't care about consequences or propriety or anything else. That's the line." Lavinia pressed too hard on a cut. He didn't flinch. "I'm going to save this estate," she said quietly. "Lavinia, there's no way." "There is." She met his eyes. "I saw it today. The land. The greenhouse. The orchards. There's so much potential being wasted. You can't turn land into money overnight. Maybe not overnight. But in 3 months." She leaned forward. "Let me try. Let me work. Let me prove that I can be useful for more than just loving your children." "You don't have to prove anything." "Yes, I do." Her voice fierce now. "Not to you. To myself. I've spent my whole life being told I'm worthless because my body couldn't do one thing. Let me show the world, show myself, what I can do." Edmund studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "All right. But not alone. We work together." "Together," Lavinia agreed. He pulled her close, kissed her forehead. "I love you. Even if we lose everything else, I need you to know that." "We're not losing anything," Lavinia said fiercely. "We're going to fight. Then God help anyone standing in our way." That night, Lavinia couldn't sleep. She stood at her window, looking out at the dark expanse of land, her mind racing with possibilities and plans. Behind her, the connecting door opened. Edmund stepped through, the first time he'd crossed that threshold since their wedding night. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. "Too much to think about." He came to stand beside her. "I meant what I said earlier. About loving you." "I know." She turned to him. "I love you too. More than I thought possible. Even now. When everything's falling apart. Especially now." She touched his face. "You chose me when I had nothing. Let me choose you back. Let me stay and fight beside you." Edmund kissed her then, deep and desperate and full of everything words couldn't hold. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "Stay tonight?" "Not for, just to not be alone." Lavinia nodded. They lay together in his bed, fully clothed, her head on his chest, his arms around her. Safe. Together. And somewhere in the darkness, Lavinia made a silent vow. She would save this place. This family. This man who'd given her everything. Whatever it took. Lavinia began at dawn. She walked the estate with Davies and the head groundskeeper, an ancient man named Hodges who'd served 3 generations of Blackwoods and remembered when the land actually produced. "This greenhouse," she said, standing before the shattered glass structure. "Can it be repaired?" Hodges scratched his chin. "Aye. But it'd cost." "How much?" He named a figure. Lavinia did the math. If she used her household allowance, stopped buying new dresses, convinced Edmund to reduce certain expenses. "Do it," she said. "And the orchards, when were they last properly pruned?" "Before the late Duchess fell ill, Your Grace." 5 years, perhaps. 5 years of neglect. 5 years of fruit rotting on branches, trees choking on their own growth. "I want them cleared. Pruned. Prepared for next season." She turned to Davies. "And I need workers. Women from Bakewell who need employment." Davies's eyebrows rose. Women, your grace. Women work. They work hard. And they work for fair wages, which we can actually afford. She met his skeptical gaze. I'll be working alongside them. If you have objections, voice them now. Silence. Good. Start tomorrow. The work was brutal. Lavinia rose before dawn, dressed in her oldest gowns, and spent 12 hours in the dirt. Her hands blistered, then calloused. Her back screamed. Her shoulders burned. She hired 15 women, widows, spinsters, wives whose husbands' wages couldn't feed growing families. She paid them fairly and worked beside them without pretension. They cleared the greenhouse first, hauling out years of debris. Then came the repairs, glass panes replaced, frames reinforced, heating system restored. The orchards followed, pruning, grafting, preparing soil. The children helped when lessons finished. Henry managed accounts, tracking every penny spent. Clara sketched garden layouts, planning what would grow where. The twins hauled water, planted seedlings, scared away birds. Sophie appointed herself Lavinia's shadow, handing her tools and chattering endlessly about how their garden would be the most beautiful in all of England. Edmund watched from windows and doorways. He didn't interfere. Didn't question. Just watched his wife transform into something fierce and determined and utterly magnificent. One evening, 3 weeks into the work, he found her in the greenhouse after dark. She was on her knees in the dirt, planting herbs by lantern light. You should be resting, he said. Can't. These need to be in the ground before the frost. He knelt beside her. Let me help. They worked in silence, side by side, until the last seedling was planted. Lavinia sat back on her heels, dirt under her nails, sweat on her brow, and smiled. It's going to work, Edmund. I know it will. He looked at her, truly looked, and saw not a duchess or a wife or a solution to his problems. He saw a woman blazing with purpose, fighting for the home she'd chosen, refusing to accept defeat. You're extraordinary, he said. She laughed, tired and genuine. I'm filthy. You're both. He pulled her close, kissed her despite the dirt and sweat, tasted salt and soil and something that might have been hope. Here's the truth about love that nobody tells you, sometimes it grows best in the dirt. Sometimes you have to fight side by side, bleed together, work until your hands crack open before you understand what you're really building. 2 months into the project, disaster struck. An early cold snap, unseasonable, vicious, the kind that killed tender plants overnight. Lavinia woke to frost coating the windows and panic clawing her chest. She threw on clothes and ran to the greenhouse. The heating system had failed. All around her, weeks of work hung in the balance. Seedlings that would become their spring crop. Herbs worth their weight in silver. Everything. We need fires, she ordered the workers who'd arrived at her summons. Every brazier, every pot, anything that burns. Now. They worked through the night, feeding fires, covering plants, desperately trying to save what they could. Edmund worked beside them, hauling wood, stoking flames, his breath visible in the freezing air. At 3 a.m., it started to rain. Ice cold, driven by wind that cut like knives. Get inside, Lavinia shouted to the women. I'll finish. No, Edmund said. We finish together. They stayed until dawn, soaked, shaking, exhausted. When the sun finally rose, Lavinia surveyed the damage with her heart in her throat. Some plants had died. But most had survived. We did it, she whispered. Edmund didn't answer. He swayed slightly, caught himself against the greenhouse frame. Edmund? His eyes lost focus. Just tired. Then his knees buckled. Lavinia caught him, barely, as he collapsed into her arms. Fever. The same fever that had taken Elizabeth. That had nearly taken Sophie. Lavinia stripped his wet clothes, wrapped him in blankets, and sat beside his bed while he burned. Not again, she whispered, pressing cool cloths to his forehead. Please, not again. For 2 days, he drifted in and out of consciousness, muttering about debts and failures, calling for Elizabeth, for the children, for Lavinia. On the second night, his fever spiked dangerously high. Lavinia worked alone. The doctor had come and gone, leaving laudanum and grim warnings. She sponged Edmund's burning skin, dribbled water between cracked lips, held his hand when convulsions racked his body. Around midnight, his eyes opened. Unfocused but searching. Lavinia? I'm here. Don't leave. His fingers tightened on hers. Everyone leaves. I'm not everyone. She pressed her lips to his knuckles. I'm staying. I promised, remember. Love you, he mumbled, half delirious. Tried not to, love you anyway, don't deserve. You deserve everything, Lavinia said fiercely. And I'm not going anywhere. Do you hear me, Edmund Blackwood? You don't get to leave me now. Not when I'm finally home. He smiled faintly, then drifted back into fever dreams. Lavinia stayed awake all night, singing the same lullabies she'd sung to Sophie, refusing to let go of his hand. By dawn, the fever broke. Edmund opened his eyes, clear this time, focused, and found Lavinia slumped in the chair beside him, still holding his hand, dark circles under her eyes. You stayed, he whispered. I told you I would. He pulled her hand to his lips, kissed her palm. Thank you. For what? For not giving up. On the garden. On me. On us. Lavinia climbed into the bed beside him, curled against his chest. I'll never give up on us. They lay like that until the house began to wake, until children's voices echoed down the hall, until life demanded they rise and face another day. But for those quiet moments, they were just two people who'd chosen each other, over and over, refusing to let go. 3 weeks later, the first shipment left for London. Herbs, lavender, mint, rosemary, thyme, bundled and packed with care. Winter vegetables from the greenhouse. Preserves from the orchard fruit they'd managed to save. Lavinia stood at the gate, watching the wagon roll away toward Bakewell station, her heart in her throat. What if it's not enough, she asked. Edmund stood beside her, his hand finding hers. Then we try again. And if we fail? Then we fail together. He squeezed her fingers. But we're not failing yet. The response came 10 days later. Lavinia was in the garden when Henry came running, waving a letter. Mama. Mama, it came. The payment. She tore open the envelope with shaking hands. The London merchants wanted everything she could send. They'd pay premium prices for quality. They wanted a contract for the full season. The amount listed would cover 3 months of debt payments. With room to spare. Lavinia read it twice, 3 times, unable to believe what she was seeing. We did it, she whispered. Then louder, we did it. Edmund appeared from the house, saw her face, and started running. She met him halfway, throwing herself into his arms. We did it, she sobbed against his chest. Edmund, we saved it. We actually saved it. He held her tight, his own eyes wet. No. You saved it. You and your impossible, stubborn, beautiful faith. She pulled back to look at him. We saved it. Together. He kissed her then, deep and grateful and full of everything they'd fought for. When they parted, both breathless, he said, Come with me. I want to show you something. He led her to the garden gate, the entrance to what had been broken earth 3 months ago and was now transformed into ordered rows of green life. Above the gate, freshly carved into new wood, were words. Lavinia's garden. Her breath caught. Edmund. You did this, he said softly. You took barren ground and made it bloom. You took a broken house and made it home. You took 5 grieving children and became their mother. You took a man who'd given up and taught him to fight again. Tears streamed down her face. We did it together. Then let this stand as proof. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, both of them looking at the garden stretching before them. Proof that nothing is truly barren. That everything can grow if someone cares enough to stay. Lavinia turned in his arms, rose on her toes, and kissed him. Not desperately this time. Not frantically. But with slow, certain intention. Take me to bed, she whispered against his lips. Please. I need. Yes, he breathed. God, yes. They barely made it to his chambers. Clothes fell away like old skin. They came together with desperate tenderness, two people who'd waited, who'd fought, who'd earned this moment. And afterward, tangled in sheets, Lavinia's head on Edmund's chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder, she whispered. I never thought I could be this happy. Neither did I. He kissed her hair. Thank you. For what? For seeing potential where everyone else saw waste. In the land. In me. In us. Lavinia propped herself up on one elbow, looked down at him. You gave me the same gift. You saw a woman everyone else discarded and you chose her anyway. Best decision I ever made. She smiled. Second best. What's first? Choosing to love me back. He pulled her down, kissed her deeply. That wasn't a choice, Lavinia. That was inevitable. Spring arrived with blossoms and betrayal. Lavinia was in the garden with Clara and the twins when the carriages rolled up the drive, 3 of them, polished and expensive, carrying men in dark coats and darker intentions. She knew trouble when she saw it. Edmund emerged from the house, his face going hard when he saw the lead carriage's crest. Reginald. Who's Reginald? Lavinia asked. My cousin. Second in line for the dukedom. Edmund's jaw tightened. And a vulture who's been waiting for me to fail. The man who stepped from the carriage looked like Edmund might have if bitterness had eaten away everything decent, same height, similar features, but with eyes like calculating machines and a smile that never reached them. Edmund. Reginald called out warmly. And this must be the new Duchess. How charming. Lavinia didn't miss the pause, the assessment, the dismissal. Behind Reginald, 2 solicitors emerged carrying leather cases stuffed with documents. We need to talk, Reginald said. Privately. They gathered in Edmund's study. Lavinia insisted on being present despite Reginald's objections. This concerns the family, Edmund said coldly. She is family. Reginald smiled. That's precisely what we need to discuss. He nodded to the solicitors. They spread documents across the desk like a prosecution laying out evidence. Your marriage, Reginald began, is problematic. In what way? Lavinia asked, her voice steady despite her pounding heart. You were divorced, annulled, barely 3 days before marrying my cousin. There are questions about the legality. Whether your first marriage was truly dissolved. Whether this second union is valid under ecclesiastical law. The marriage is legal, Edmund said flatly. Perhaps. Perhaps not. Reginald leaned forward. But the question alone is enough to create complications. For the estate. For the children. For the dukedom itself. Lavinia's stomach dropped. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting, Reginald's smile widened, that if your marriage is invalid, then Edmund's guardianship of the children becomes questionable. They're not his by blood, after all. Wards left to him by his late wife's will. If he's not properly married, if his household is irregular. You take the children. Lavinia's voice went cold as winter. I'd ensure they're raised properly. In a stable, legitimate household. Reginald turned to Edmund. Unless you'd like to avoid that unpleasantness. What do you want? Edmund asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. Annul this marriage. Marry properly. I have 3 suitable ladies in mind, all from good families, all capable of producing heirs. Send Mrs. Hartley away with a generous settlement. Keep the children. Save your reputation. The room went silent. Lavinia felt the world tilt beneath her. After everything, after the garden, after saving the estate, after becoming a mother to 5 children who'd chosen her, they wanted to erase it all. Sometimes the cruelest weapon isn't violence. It's the law used by powerful people to destroy what powerless people have built. But Lavinia had learned something in the past year: she wasn't powerless anymore. Or, Reginald continued, I take this to court. Challenge the marriage publicly. Drag every detail of your arrangement through the papers. Question the children's guardianship. By the time the courts finish, your reputation will be destroyed and the children will be mine anyway. He sat back, confident. Your choice, cousin. Edmund stood so abruptly his chair crashed backward. Get out. Reginald blinked. Excuse me. You heard me. Get out of my house. Now. Edmund, be reasonable. I said. Get out. Edmund's voice could have frozen flames. Before I throw you out myself. You're making a mistake. Davies. Edmund shouted. The butler appeared instantly. Show my cousin and his parasites to their carriages. If they're not off my land in 5 minutes, release the dogs. Reginald stood slowly, his smile finally fading. You'll regret this. I'll destroy you in court. Try. Edmund moved to stand beside Lavinia, his hand finding hers. But you'll lose. And I'll bankrupt myself in legal fees just to watch you fail. After they left, carriages rolling away in clouds of offended dust, Edmund turned to Lavinia. I need to tell you something. What? I sold Blackwood House. 3 weeks ago. Before Reginald showed up. Lavinia's eyes widened. You what? I couldn't keep both properties. And London was never home. This is. He gestured around them. Hadley Park. The children. You. So I sold it. Paid off most of the debt. The estate is secure. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted to be sure first. Because I didn't want you to think I was giving up London for you and resent me later. He cupped her face in his hands. But I'd give up everything for you. The title, the estate, every penny I have left. You're what matters. You and the children. Lavinia's vision blurred. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. He kissed her forehead. I'm not losing you to save anything. You are what I'm saving. That evening, Edmund called a family meeting. All 5 children gathered in the drawing room, confused and nervous. They'd heard the shouting, seen the angry visitors. I need to tell you something, Edmund began. A man came today claiming our family isn't legitimate. That Lavinia and I aren't properly married. That he should take you away from us. Sophie grabbed Lavinia's hand. Henry went pale. Clara's grip tightened on her shawl. He's wrong, Edmund continued. Legally, morally, in every way that matters, he's wrong. But he might try to take us to court anyway. To fight us. To separate our family. Then we fight back, Henry said immediately. We do, Edmund agreed. But I need you to understand something. Fighting means publicity. People talking. Newspapers writing stories about Lavinia's first marriage, about our arrangement, about all of us. It won't be pleasant. We don't care, Amelia said. The others nodded. Mama stays, William added fiercely. She's ours. Lavinia's throat closed. Clara stood, walked over, and placed her mother's shawl, the one she'd clutched for 2 years, around Lavinia's shoulders. You stayed when Mama died, she said quietly. When everyone else ran. When everything was terrible and we were terrible and nothing made sense. You stayed. She looked at her father. We're not letting anyone take her away. Edmund's eyes glistened. Then we're agreed. We fight. Together. Together, they echoed. Later, after the younger children were in bed, Henry lingered. "Father, there's something we've been discussing. All of us." He straightened, suddenly formal. "We want you to adopt us. Properly. Legally. Make Lavinia our mother in every way, not just in practice." Edmund looked stunned. "You're sure?" "We took a vote." Henry smiled slightly. "It was unanimous. We want our family to be real. Official. So people like Cousin Reginald can't question it." Lavinia couldn't speak. Tears streamed silently down her face. "Then we'll do it," Edmund said, his own voice rough with emotion. "As soon as possible. I'll contact the solicitors tomorrow." Henry nodded and turned to leave. At the door, he paused. "Mama," he said, using the title he'd resisted longest. "Thank you. For making us a family again." 2 weeks later, the new gate was installed. Wrought iron, magnificent, bearing the Blackwood ducal crest on one side and, newly added, Lavinia's family crest on the other, intertwined like vines growing together. Beneath both, an inscription in Latin, Amor vincit omnia. Love conquers all. The entire household gathered for the unveiling. Lavinia stood with Edmund's arm around her waist, the children clustered close. "This stands as a message," Edmund announced. "To everyone who passes. To Reginald. To anyone who questions this family." He looked at Lavinia. "She belongs here. Permanently. Irrevocably. And nothing, no law, no cousin, no scandal, will change that." He turned to the workers who'd installed the gate. "There's one more thing." They brought forward a wooden sign, beautifully carved, to be mounted beside the gate. "The Blackwood family estate not for sale." Love planted these roots. Sometimes the most powerful statement you can make isn't loud or dramatic. It's a sign that says, we're staying. We're building. We're not going anywhere. And there's nothing you can do about it. Sophie tugged Lavinia's hand. "Does this mean Cousin Reginald can't take us?" "No one can take you," Lavinia said firmly. "You're mine. All of you. Forever. Promise? Promise." That night, after the children finally slept, Edmund found Lavinia standing at the window of their bedroom, no longer separate chambers, but truly shared now. "Regrets?" he asked. "About what?" "Choosing this. Choosing us. Choosing a life where people will always question and judge and try to tear us apart." Lavinia turned to face him. "Edmund Blackwood, I was sold like livestock, divorced for being barren, and told I was worthless for 30 years. The last year with you and the children has been the first time I've felt like I mattered. Like I had purpose. Like I was enough exactly as I am." She crossed to him, placed her hands on his chest. "So no. No regrets. Not even one." He kissed her deeply, reverently. "I don't deserve you." "You're right," she said against his lips. "You deserve better. But you're stuck with me anyway." He laughed, full and genuine and filled with joy, and pulled her close. Outside, the new gate gleamed in the moonlight, declaring to anyone who passed. This family was real. This love was legitimate. And nothing would tear them apart. 15 years passed like seasons turning. Lavinia stood in the gardens on a crisp October morning, her hands still in the soil despite silver threading through her hair. She was 43 now, with laugh lines at her eyes and calluses that never quite faded from her palms. The gardens had grown beyond anything she'd imagined. What had started as desperate survival now stretched across 40 acres, greenhouses producing year-round, orchards heavy with fruit, herb gardens supplying half the finest hotels in London. The business employed 60 families from Bakewell, all paid fair wages, all treated with the same respect Lavinia had insisted upon from the beginning. Lavinia's garden had become legendary. But Lavinia still worked the soil herself every morning, refusing to become the kind of duchess who merely supervised from terraces. Edmund watched her from the library window, coffee in hand, the same ritual he'd performed for 15 years. His hair had gone fully silver, his face lined with years, but his eyes when he looked at his wife still held the same wonder. Still mooning over mother. Henry appeared beside him, now 27, a successful barrister in London, visiting for the weekend with his wife Mary and 2 daughters. Every day, Edmund admitted without shame. It's been 16 years. And I'll moon over her for 16 more. 60 more. However many I get. Edmund turned to his son. When you find something that transforms your entire existence, you don't stop being grateful for it. Henry smiled. She's in the dirt again. Where else would she be? In the garden, Lavinia wasn't alone. Her eldest granddaughter, Henry's daughter, Elizabeth, named for the grandmother she'd never known, knelt beside her, small hands mimicking Lavinia's movements. Like this, Grandmama, the 6-year-old asked, patting soil around a seedling. Perfect, darling. You're a natural. Will I have a garden someday? You can have this one if you'd like. When you're older. Elizabeth thought about this seriously. But it's your garden. Everyone says so. They come from London just to see Lavinia's garden. Lavinia paused, studying the child. Come with me. I want to show you something. She led Elizabeth to the main entrance, that magnificent wrought iron gate installed 15 years ago, now weathered to a beautiful patina. Above it, carved into wood that had aged to match the iron, was a sign Lavinia had never mentioned to the child before. Lavinia's garden here grew everything she was never given, and all that she gave anyway. Elizabeth sounded out the words slowly, her finger tracing each letter. When she finished, she looked up with wide eyes. What does it mean? It means, Lavinia said softly, kneeling to the child's level, that sometimes the things we can't have make room for the things we're meant to find. I couldn't have children of my own. But I found your father and your aunts and uncles. I couldn't stay in my first marriage. But I found your grandfather. I couldn't be what the world said I should be. So I became something else instead. What did you become? Happy. Lavinia smiled. I became happy. Elizabeth hugged her fiercely. I'm glad you found us. Me too, sweetheart. Every single day. That evening, Hadley Park filled with noise and life. All 5 children had come home for an extended holiday, the first time in 2 years they'd all been together. Henry with his wife Mary and their 2 daughters. Clara, unmarried by choice, running a successful girls' school on estate grounds and perfectly content. William, managing Hadley Park's agricultural expansion, recently engaged to a farmer's daughter who loved the land as much as he did. Amelia, home from Cambridge where she was completing a doctorate in botany, scandalous and wonderful. And Sophie, now 19, a published author of botanical illustrations, her books in libraries across England. This is what love looks like when it's given time to grow, not perfection, but abundance. Not one way to be a family, but many ways to flourish. The dinner table stretched to accommodate everyone. 3 generations laughing, arguing, talking over each other in that way families do when joy outweighs manners. Lavinia sat between Edmund and little Elizabeth, her heart so full it ached. Mama, Sophie said during dessert, the publisher wants another book. This time about heritage gardens. I was hoping. You want to feature Hadley Park, Lavinia guessed. I want to tell the story. About how you built this. About what it means. Lavinia glanced at Edmund. He nodded slightly. Then tell it, Lavinia said. The truth. All of it. The divorce, the arrangement, the struggle. Tell them that gardens don't grow from privilege, they grow from stubbornness and hope and refusing to believe the soil is really barren. Sophie's eyes shone. You're sure? I'm sure. Lavinia raised her wine glass. To stubborn hope. To stubborn hope, the table echoed, glasses clinking. Later, when the younger children had been put to bed and the adults lingered over port and conversation, Henry drew his father aside. I've been thinking about the dukedom, he said quietly. About succession. About what happens when I die. Edmund said bluntly. You'll inherit. As it should be. But I'm adopted. Technically, Reginald still has a claim. Reginald, Edmund said coldly, lost any claim when he tried to destroy this family. The adoption is legal. Ironclad. You're my heir in every way that matters. Don't waste energy worrying about that parasite. Henry nodded, then smiled slightly. You know what he'll hate most? That the dukedom passes to the Barren woman's son. Good, Edmund said with satisfaction. Let him choke on it. They rejoined the others. Edmund found Lavinia on the terrace, wrapped in a shawl, watching stars appear. Cold? He asked, slipping his arms around her from behind. A little. But it's beautiful out here. Everything's beautiful when you're in it. She laughed. You're shameless. I'm honest. He kissed her temple. Look at what we built, Lavinia. Look at them in there, our children, their children, all of it growing from what we started. From that desperate bargain in your father's study. Best bargain I ever made. Second best, he corrected. What's first? Choosing to stay. That first week when you could have run. You chose to stay. He turned her to face him. That's when everything became possible. Lavinia touched his face, tracing the lines time had etched there. I love you. Still. Always. Still and always, he agreed. They stood like that, wrapped in each other in 16 years of choosing love over fear, until the cold drove them inside to warmth and family and the life they built from broken pieces. The next morning, Edmund found Lavinia in her usual spot, the garden, early light, hands in the earth. He brought 2 cups of tea and sat on the bench he'd built for her 10th anniversary. The one with their initials carved in the back, intertwined like the crests on the gate. I've been thinking, he said. Dangerous activity. About expanding. There's land to the east, another 20 acres. We could double production. Create more jobs. Lavinia smiled. After everything, you still want to grow. Why not? We proved barren land was a lie. Might as well prove there's no limit to what we can build. He set down his tea, took her dirt-stained hand. As long as you're beside me. Always, she promised. And she meant it. Because Lavinia had learned something in 16 years of marriage, love wasn't the passionate beginning or the dramatic gestures. It was this, tea in a garden, dirt under your nails, planning impossible expansions with a man who believed you could achieve them. It was choosing each other every morning. It was building something that would outlast you both. It was proving, day after day, that nothing is truly barren if someone cares enough to stay. That afternoon, the entire family gathered for a photograph. The photographer had been commissioned by Sophie for her book, 3 Generations standing before the garden gate, the sign visible above them. Lavinia stood in the center, Edmund's hand on her shoulder. The 5 children, grown now, successful, happy, surrounded them. Grandchildren peeked between adult legs, grinning at the camera. Everyone still, the photographer called. No one move. Of course, they moved. William whispered something to Amelia. Clara laughed. One of the grandchildren made a face. But when the photograph was developed weeks later, what it captured was perfect. Not a posed, formal portrait of aristocratic perfection. But a real family. Messy and joyful and absolutely, undeniably whole. And in the center, a woman who'd been told she was worthless, who'd been sold like property, who'd been cast aside for failing to do the one thing society demanded. Looking at the camera with dirt under her nails and love in her eyes and 5 children who'd chosen to call her mother. Sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is simply refuse to believe the world when it says you're not enough. Lavinia proved that. Every single day for 16 years. Later, when the family had scattered to various activities and Lavinia found herself alone in the library, she discovered an envelope on her desk. Inside, a letter in Edmund's handwriting. My dearest Lavinia. 16 years ago, I stood in your father's drawing room and made you a proposal born of desperation. I promised you safety, respect, and a roof over your head. I thought I was giving you a refuge. I didn't understand that you were the refuge. You took a broken house and made it a home. You took grieving children and gave them joy. You took land that produced nothing and created an empire. You took a man who'd forgotten how to hope and taught him to dream again. Every morning, I watch you work in the garden. Every morning, I'm astounded that you're mine. That you chose to stay. That somehow, against all logic and expectation, my desperate gamble became the greatest blessing of my life. Thank you for 16 years of choosing us. Thank you for every callus on your beautiful hands, every plant you've nurtured, every child you've raised, every impossible thing you've made possible. You are extraordinary. Not despite your circumstances, but because of what you chose to do with them. Yours, always and entirely, Edmund. Lavinia read it 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Then she tucked it carefully into her desk drawer, alongside 15 other anniversary letters, each one declaring love in different words but with the same absolute certainty. She was loved. She was enough. She was home. And no one, not society, not cruel cousins, not even her own doubts, could take that away. Lavinia died on a Tuesday in spring. She was 64 years old, her hands still calloused from morning work in the garden, her hair white as apple blossoms, her face lined with years of laughter and sun. She'd been planting roses, a new variety she'd cultivated herself, deep red with edges of gold. She stood to admire her work, smiled at something only she could see, and simply stopped. Edmund found her there 10 minutes later, kneeling in the soil she loved, her expression peaceful, one hand still holding a trowel. She looked like she was resting. Like she'd just decided to stay in the garden a little longer. The doctor said her heart had simply given out. Quick. Painless. A mercy, really. Edmund couldn't speak for 3 days. They buried her beneath the old oak tree at the garden center, the one where they'd shared their first real kiss 21 years ago, where he'd held her after Sophie's fever broke, where she'd told him she was staying forever. The funeral drew hundreds. Workers from the gardens, all 60 families she'd employed. Women from Clara's school. Merchants from London who'd built their businesses on her produce. Villagers whose children she'd fed during hard winters. Aristocrats who'd initially scorned her but eventually couldn't deny the empire she'd built. All 5 children stood at the graveside, Henry now 37, Clara 35, the twins 32, Sophie 29. All successful. All whole. All hers. 13 grandchildren clustered close, confused and grieving for the woman who taught them to plant seeds and believe in impossible things. Edmund stood at the head of the grave, silent and hollow, one hand resting on the simple headstone he'd carved himself. It bore only one line. Here grew everything she was never given, and all that she gave anyway. She would have hated the fuss, Edmund said finally, his voice cracked and raw. She would have said to stop crying and get back to work. That the herbs won't harvest themselves. A ripple of tearful laughter moved through the crowd. But she also would have understood, he continued, that sometimes you need to stop. To acknowledge what you've lost. To say goodbye to the person who changed everything. He looked down at the grave, at the fresh earth that covered his wife, his partner, his entire world. Lavinia Blackwood was told she was worthless. Barren. A failure. Society looked at her and saw only what she couldn't give them. His voice strengthened. But she looked at herself and saw something different. She saw potential. Possibility. The capacity to build instead of bear, to choose instead of comply, to prove that a woman's worth isn't measured in what her body can produce but in what her heart decides to create. He paused, throat working. She created this. He gestured to the garden stretching in every direction. She created them. He looked at his children. She created a life that mattered not because it looked like what others expected, but because it looked like love. Henry stepped forward, placed a hand on his father's shoulder. Edmund covered it with his own and continued. I married her out of desperation. She stayed out of necessity. But somewhere between survival and choice, we found something neither of us expected. We found home. His voice broke. And now she's gone. And I don't know how to. He couldn't finish. Clara moved to his other side. Then the twins. Then Sophie. All of them surrounding their father, holding him upright, proving that what Lavinia had built was strong enough to hold even this. If you're reading this and you've ever felt worthless, ever been told you weren't enough, ever believed the world's assessment of your value, please listen. Lavinia thought that too. For 30 years, she believed the lie. And then she chose differently. She chose to build. To stay. To prove that barren ground was always a myth. Don't wait 30 years to start planting. Start today. Right now. Whatever soil you're standing on, it can grow something beautiful. The crowd dispersed slowly, but Edmund remained. He stood there until sunset painted the sky gold and red, until the last visitor had gone, until he was alone with the earth that held his heart. I don't know how to do this without you, he whispered to the grave. I don't know how to wake up tomorrow and the day after that and all the days that come without you in them. The wind rustled through the oak leaves above him. Somewhere, a bird sang. Edmund sank to his knees beside the fresh grave, pressed his hand to the earth. But I'll try. Because you stayed when you could have left. So I'll stay too. I'll keep the gardens growing. Keep the children close. Keep building what we started together. He wiped his eyes, breathed deep, stood. I love you, Lavinia Blackwood. I loved you from the moment you chose to trust me. I'll love you until I stop breathing. He walked back to the house as darkness fell, his steps heavy but certain. Behind him, the oak tree stood sentinel over the woman who transformed barren earth into abundance. And beneath it, Lavinia rested in the soil she'd always loved best. Edmund kept his promise. Every morning for the next 2 years, he rose at dawn, made 2 cups of tea, and carried them to the oak tree. He'd drink one, pour the second onto the grave, and sit on the bench they'd shared for 2 decades. Sometimes he talked to her. Sometimes he just sat in silence. But he always told her about the children, Henry's new case, Clara's school expansion, William's engagement, Amelia's research breakthrough, Sophie's latest book. They're doing well, he'd say. Because of you. All because of you. The gardens continued to flourish under William's management. Clara's school expanded to 3 locations across Derbyshire. Henry became a judge. Amelia published groundbreaking research on sustainable agriculture. Sophie's books were studied in universities across Europe. Grandchildren grew. Great-grandchildren were born. The family expanded like the gardens, wild, abundant, beautiful. But Edmund grew quieter. Thinner. More transparent, like he was slowly fading into the world where Lavinia waited. On a gray morning in March, Davies found him at the oak tree, still in his chair, cold tea beside him, his hand resting on the grave. A soft smile on his face. He'd simply joined her. They buried him beside Lavinia with no space between the headstones. His stone bore the words. He chose her when no one would. A single inscription connected both stones, carved into the base where they met. Together, they proved that love grows best in impossible soil. Henry stood at his father's grave, now Duke of Blackwood, and thought about the man who'd chosen to become his father when he didn't have to. He loved her until his last breath, Henry said to his siblings. 23 years together. 2 years apart. And every single day, he chose her again. Sophie knelt, placed a single red gold rose, Lavinia's final variety, between the graves. They're together now, she whispered. Finally. Clara wrapped her mother's old shawl, still kept, still treasured, around Sophie's shoulders. And William and Amelia held hands, silent, remembering the woman who taught them that family wasn't blood. It was choice. 48 years later. The gardens didn't stop. Even when frost came early, even when drought threatened, even when economics shifted and competition grew, Lavinia's garden kept producing. It had become something beyond business. Beyond legacy. It was proof. Fourth and fifth generation Blackwoods managed it now, but they still followed Lavinia's original principles: fair wages, sustainable practices, and the absolute certainty that nothing was truly barren if someone cared enough to tend it. Hadley Park had been preserved as a National Trust property. The house was a museum. The gardens were a heritage site. Tourists came from around the world to walk the paths Lavinia had designed, to see the greenhouses she'd restored, to stand beneath the oak tree where two people who shouldn't have worked somehow created something extraordinary. The original gate still stood, weathered now, the iron aged to a beautiful patina, but the inscription still clear. Lavinia's garden here grew everything she was never given, and all that she gave anyway. And beside it, that wooden sign Edmund had commissioned, lovingly restored every decade. Not for sale. Love planted these roots. On a spring morning in 2024, a young woman stood before the gate. 26 years old. Recently divorced. Recently told by doctors that she'd never carry children. Her ex-husband had left her for someone younger, someone fertile, someone who could give him what she couldn't. She'd driven 3 hours from Manchester because a friend had sent her an article about Lavinia Blackwood, the Barren Duchess who built an empire from soil everyone said was worthless. Sometimes you stumble across a story at exactly the moment you need it, the article had said. Sometimes a woman who's been dead for 70 years reaches across time and tells you, you're not broken. The world is. The young woman, her name was Sarah, read the plaques. The signs. The carefully preserved story of a woman who'd been sold, discarded, told she had no value. Who'd proven every single person wrong. A curator approached, elderly, silver-haired, carrying herself with quiet dignity. Her name badge read, Elizabeth Blackwood, Heritage Director. First time visiting, she asked gently. Sarah nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. My great-great-great-grandmother built this, Elizabeth said softly. She was told she was worthless because her body couldn't do one specific thing. So she chose to do everything else instead. Did it work? Sarah whispered. Did she stop feeling broken? Elizabeth smiled, and Sarah saw Lavinia in that smile, saw Edmund, saw generations of love passed down like seeds. I don't know if she stopped feeling broken. But she stopped letting that brokenness define her. She looked at herself and said, fine. I can't have children. What can I do? She gestured to the garden stretching in every direction, acres of blooming life, families picnicking under century-old trees, children running through paths their great-grandparents had walked. She has hundreds of descendants now. 5 children who chose her. Dozens of grandchildren and great-grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren. We carry her name, her legacy, her absolute certainty that worth isn't measured in what you can't give but in what you choose to build. Sarah's tears finally fell. I don't know how to build anything. I don't know how to stop feeling like I failed. Elizabeth reached out, squeezed her hand. Neither did Lavinia. Not at first. She was terrified. She failed at basic tasks. She broke heirlooms and spilled things and thought she was proving everyone right. What changed? She stayed anyway. She kept trying. She found one thing she could do and did it. Then another. Then another. Elizabeth's eyes were gentle but fierce. Lavinia's gift wasn't that she was perfect. It was that she refused to give up on herself when everyone else already had. I'm so tired of being told I'm not enough. Then stop listening. Elizabeth said it kindly but firmly. My great-great-great-grandmother was told she wasn't enough for 30 years. 30 years. She believed it. Until she met a man desperate enough to look past what she couldn't do and see what she could. And then she spent 23 years proving that the world had been wrong all along. Sarah looked at the gates, the gardens, the legacy of a woman she'd never meet. Can I walk the gardens? Of course. Elizabeth smiled. That's what they're here for. To remind people that Barren is always a lie. Sarah walked slowly through Lavinia's creation. Past roses Lavinia had cultivated, still blooming, still beautiful, still defying every expectation. Past the greenhouse where Lavinia had spent freezing nights saving plants that should have died. Past the orchards where 5 children had learned to work alongside a woman who taught them that family was a choice, not an accident. She stopped at the oak tree. The graves were simple. Weathered. Beautiful. Fresh flowers lay there, descendants who'd never forgotten, tourists who'd been moved, women who'd needed to believe that second chances were real. Sarah read the inscription slowly. Here grew everything she was never given, and all that she gave anyway. He chose her when no one would. Together, they proved that love grows best in impossible soil. She knelt in the grass, touched the stone with trembling fingers. "I don't know if you can hear me," she whispered. "But thank you. For not giving up. For proving it was possible." The wind moved through the oak leaves above, soft, gentle, like a whisper across generations. "You're not barren, darling. You never were." Sarah sat there for an hour. Maybe 2. Time felt different under that tree. When she finally stood, something had shifted in her chest. Not healing, exactly. Not yet. But the first small seed of belief that maybe, she could build something beautiful from the ashes of what she'd lost. That maybe her worth wasn't defined by what her body couldn't do. That maybe, like Lavinia, she could look at herself and see possibility instead of failure. At the visitor center, Sarah bought 3 things. Sophie's book about the gardens. A packet of seeds from Lavinia's original rose variety. And a small print of that family photograph, 3 generations standing before the gate, messy and joyful and whole. Elizabeth rang up the purchases. "The roses are tricky," she warned. "They need patience. Constant care. They'll fail repeatedly before they bloom." "Like people," Sarah said quietly. "Exactly like people." Elizabeth handed her the bag. "But when they finally bloom, they're the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. Lavinia always said that's what made them worth it." Sarah took the bag, hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you think she'd be proud of what all of you became?" Elizabeth's eyes grew bright. "I think she'd be stunned that we remember her at all. Lavinia never thought she was special. She just thought she was doing what needed doing." She smiled. "But yes. I think she'd be proud. Not of what we accomplished, but of what we chose. Because that's what mattered to her, not perfection, but choice. Here's what nobody tells you about changing your life: you don't need permission. You don't need perfect circumstances. You don't need to be healed or whole or ready. You just need to plant one seed. Then another. Then another." Lavinia was 30 years old, divorced, discarded, and terrified when she started. She didn't wait for confidence. She didn't wait to feel brave. She just started digging. "What are you waiting for?" Sarah left Hadley Park as the sun was setting, the bag of seeds in her hand, something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Hope. 6 months later. Sarah stood in her tiny Manchester flat, looking at 3 things on her kitchen table. The photograph from Hadley Park, now framed, hung above her desk. Sophie's book, dog-eared from repeated reading, margins filled with Sarah's notes. And a small pot on the windowsill where a single red gold rose was blooming. It had taken 17 attempts. 17 times the seedling died. 17 times Sarah had wanted to give up, to accept that maybe she really was the problem, maybe she really couldn't make anything grow. But she'd kept trying. Because Lavinia had taught her that Barren was a lie. And on the 18th attempt, something had taken root. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from her sister: "I saw your Instagram. The garden looks amazing. When did you become a plant person?" Sarah looked around her flat. It didn't look like much, but every surface held something growing. Herbs on the windowsill. Vegetables in makeshift planters. Flowers in chipped teacups. Small things. Imperfect things. But alive. Growing. Proving something she'd needed to believe. She typed back, "I'm not a plant person. I'm a person who plants. There's a difference." Then she opened her laptop to the document she'd been working on for 3 months, a blog about the women who'd found her through social media after she'd posted about Hadley Park. Dozens of them now. All divorced. All told they were worthless. All learning to plant seeds in impossible soil. They called themselves Lavinia's daughters. And they were building gardens in apartment balconies, community plots, abandoned lots, proving over and over that nothing was truly barren. Sarah's first post had been simple. "I can't have children. My husband left me because my body failed at the one thing society says I'm supposed to do. For months, I believed I was worthless. Then I found a woman who'd been dead for 70 years, and she taught me that worth isn't about what you can produce. It's about what you choose to create. This is my garden. These are my seeds. This is my proof that I'm not broken. The world is." The post had gone viral. 10,000 shares. 20,000. Women from 6 continents reaching out to say, "Me too. I needed this. Thank you." Sarah smiled, touched the rose on her windowsill, and started typing. Present day, the oak tree. The graves beneath the oak are never without flowers. Every week, fresh bouquets appear, descendants who've never forgotten, tourists who were moved by the story, women who needed to believe that second chances were real. The inscription connecting both headstones has been traced and retraced so many times the letters shine. Together, they prove that love grows best in impossible soil. And around those graves, the garden continues. Wild now, untamed in the way Lavinia always preferred. Roses climbing the oak tree. Herbs spilling over paths. Life everywhere, abundant, defiant, absolutely refusing to be called barren. Because Lavinia Blackwood proved something that resonates a century and a half later. Your worth isn't measured in what you were told you should be. It's measured in what you choose to become. Final scene. Late spring evening, 2024. The last tourists are leaving Hadley Park. The gates are closing. But under the oak tree, Elizabeth Blackwood, great-great-great-granddaughter, stands with her own daughter. 7 years old. Curious. Full of questions. "Grandmama," the little girl asks. "Why do so many people come here?" Elizabeth kneels beside her, gestures to the graves, the garden, the impossible beauty surrounding them. Because a long time ago, a woman was told she had no value. That she'd failed at being a woman because her body couldn't do one thing everyone said was important. That's mean. It was mean. And it was wrong. Elizabeth touches the gravestone gently. But instead of believing them, she decided to prove them wrong. She planted a garden. She raised 5 children who weren't hers by blood. She built a business that fed hundreds of families. She created a legacy that lasted generations. She sounds strong. She was terrified, Elizabeth corrects gently. She failed constantly. She broke things and made mistakes and cried herself to sleep wondering if she was doing anything right. Then how did she do all that? Elizabeth smiles. She stayed. When it was hard. When it hurt. When everyone told her to give up. She just kept planting seeds. One after another after another. Until the impossible became possible. The little girl thinks about this. Do you think she knew? That all these people would come see what she made? No. Elizabeth stands, takes her daughter's hand. She just knew that she refused to believe the world when it said she wasn't enough. And that made all the difference. They walk toward the car, but the little girl stops at the gate, reads the sign slowly. Lavinia's garden here grew everything she was never given, and all that she gave anyway. Mama? Will you teach me to plant things? Elizabeth's eyes fill with tears, happy ones. Yes, darling. I'll teach you everything she taught us. As they drive away, the setting sun catches the garden gates, wrought iron and weathered wood, strong and enduring. And carved into the arch above everything, words that glow in the golden light. Not for sale. Love planted these roots. Lavinia Hartley was cast aside for being barren. She was told she was worthless. She was told she had failed. She was told she would never be enough. She responded by making the whole world bloom. She raised 5 children who became judges and teachers and researchers and artists. She built gardens that fed thousands. She created a legacy that outlived empires. She proved that barren was always a lie. And in the heart of Derbyshire, where a lonely duke once chose a discarded woman, the gardens still bloom, wild, abundant, and utterly untamed, for those brave enough to believe that love can make the impossible possible. Her story lives because it needed to be told. Not for her, but for you. For every person reading this who's ever been told they're not enough. For everyone who's failed at the thing society says matters most. For anyone standing in soil that looks dead, wondering if anything beautiful can grow there. It can. You can. You just have to choose to start planting. Lavinia Blackwood proved that you don't need to be perfect to be extraordinary. You just need to refuse to give up on yourself when everyone else already has. And her garden still grows, 70 years after she left it, whispering to anyone who'll listen. You are not barren. You never were. You're just waiting to discover what you're meant to grow. Start today. Right now. Whatever soil you're standing on, it can bloom. But here's the thing about stories like Lavinia's, they only change lives when they reach the people who need them. Right now, there's a woman in your life who needs to hear this. The one who's been told she failed. The one who believes she's broken. The one standing in impossible soil wondering if anything beautiful can grow there. If this story moved you, don't just keep it to yourself. Share it. Send it to her. Post it. Let it reach the women who are still standing at that courtroom door, believing the lies the world told them about their worth. And if you want more stories like this, stories that remind you that broken people can build beautiful things, that impossible soil can bloom, that your worst moment doesn't define your worth, then subscribe to this channel. Because we're building a garden here too. A community of people who refuse to believe that barren is real. Every week, we plant seeds. We tell stories of people who were discarded and chose to grow anyway. We prove, over and over, that worth isn't about what you produce, it's about what you choose to create. Don't just watch this story and walk away unchanged. Let it change you. Let it move you. And then, this is important, subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because the woman you'll be next year needs the story we're telling next week. Lavinia didn't wait for permission to start her garden. Don't wait for permission to start yours. Subscribe. Share this story. Plant your first seed today. Because 70 years from now, someone might be telling your story. The question is, what will it say? Will it say you gave up when things got hard? Or will it say you stayed, you planted, you proved that barren was always a lie? The choice is yours. But you have to make it now. Dedicated to every woman who was ever told she wasn't enough because she couldn't do one specific thing. You are Lavinia. Your garden is waiting. But only if you choose to start planting. Subscribe to this channel, not for us, but for the version of yourself who needs next week's story to keep going. Because you're building something. And we're here to remind you, every single week, that you can. Don't scroll past this. Subscribe now. Your future self will thank you. And share this with someone who needs it. Because Lavinia's legacy isn't just her garden, it's every life her story changes. Make sure yours is one of them.